Well, since Russia invaded Ukraine in early 2022, the U.S. has sent tanks and missiles and artillery and helicopters, drones, missile defense systems, troop transports, radar, loads of infantry weapons and equipment, and so on. In all, more than $75 billion worth of aid has gone to Ukraine from the U.S. And military spending, this part right here, accounts for well over half of that total. That is much, much more than the U.S. sends to any other country, and it absolutely dwarfs American contributions to Israel, which in 2021 was in the typical range of $3 to $4 billion, Laura.
Wow, just seeing the numbers laid out, it's really stunning to think about, and that's quite a difference. We have recent CNN polling, I think, on what Americans actually think about what you've just described. Let's start with Israel. What do those polls say?
Yeah, if you look at these, American sympathy for Israel is on a real upswing right now, so you might expect strong support for that relatively modest amount of U.S. aid to Israel. But the numbers paint a murkier picture. 35% of Americans say the current level of aid is about right. 15% say it's too much. 14% say it's too little. And 36%, the largest single group here, say they're unsure. And an interesting side note in this, the numbers show that Republicans and those who watch the news closely are more favorable to this current level of aid, Laura.
So what about Ukraine funding? Is there polling about that?
Yeah, we have one from back in August, and in that case, it shows a dramatic drop since the early days of the war when a large majority of Americans favored help to Ukraine, whether it's because of the length of the conflict or the raw amount of money that's sent that way. 55% of Americans, this number right down here, they are currently saying there should be no additional funding for Ukraine, and 45% say the money should keep flowing. And here, Republicans are saying that's enough spending for Ukraine. They strongly oppose more spending, and Democrats solidly favor more money for the fight against the Russians. So all of these numbers, put together the turmoil up on Capitol Hill. That's what President Biden is up against when he made that speech tonight, and what he'll be up against in coming days.
The U.S. is delivering its first military aid package to Taiwan in an effort to deter any possible future aggression from China. Officials say the $345 million package includes training and weapons from U.S. stockpiles. It also comes as America gives military assistance to Ukraine. Officials estimate the U.S. has given at least $44 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since January of 2021. Retired Marine Colonel Mark Kansian joins me now. He's a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Colonel, what message is this stockpile sending China?
It's sending two messages to China. First, it is a clear message of U.S. support for Taiwanese autonomy. It strengthens Taiwan's ability to defend itself, but it also will enhance U.S. and Taiwanese military-to-military contacts, so it makes the United States even a closer partner with Taiwan.
So are we essentially giving them a green light to invade Taiwan? Could that be read in between the lines?
No, this will strengthen the Taiwanese armed forces. It will make it easier for them to resist Chinese invasion. For a long time, the Taiwanese were trying to hold the Chinese at a distance, but the Chinese buildup has been so significant, they'll almost certainly be able to get onto the island. A lot of the aid will strengthen its army.
So let's say China were to invade Taiwan. Colonel, can the U.S. realistically support the needs of both Ukraine and the needs in the Pacific all at once?
Well, there are really two questions there. One is, if China were to invade Taiwan, could the United States and its partners maintain an autonomous and democratic Taiwan? CSIS conducted a year-long project looking at that question. We developed a war game, ran it 25 times, and the answer was, in most circumstances, yes, the United States and Taiwan could maintain an autonomous Taiwan. The problem is it comes at very high cost. The second question is, can we support Ukraine and Taiwan at the same time? And the problem there is that there is some overlap, and it will be difficult to support them both at the levels that they would like to receive equipment. There's going to need to be some coordination. So what we send to Taiwan would not be what Ukraine needs, and also I think some sequencing so that Ukraine gets priority for the year or so that the war continues to go on, and then Taiwan gets priority after that.
So U.S. defense spending is vast and some would argue unchecked. Still, some people might be concerned that seeing all of this aid, all of these supplies go overseas would put America at risk. Is that a reality?
Well, this increases some risks, but it decreases others. For example, it decreases risks in the Pacific because now Taiwan will be able to resist more effectively. China has been identified as the U.S. major military competitor. It also reduces risk in Europe because the Ukrainians are using these weapons to weaken Russia, and that is also one of the major U.S. threats. So that risk goes down. On the other hand, if a war were to occur someplace else, say in Korea or in the Middle East, U.S. stockpiles are lower. They'll be low for many years. The risks there have gone up.
Colonel Mark Cancian, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Right here in New York, if you're a migrant, you're guaranteed housing, some of them being placed in hotel rooms that average $300 a night. Then a number of those migrants qualify to be part of the $53 million debit card pilot program. That means they are handed $1,000 on a debit card each and every month. Add SNAP benefits on top of that, and we're talking an additional $1,400. In Los Angeles, migrants are given full coverage health insurance and soon could also get $1,000 a month through the city's new guaranteed income pilot program, which is immigration status blind. That means you could get it even if you're not here legally. And in Chicago, they so far have spent $300 million since 2023 on migrants. That's on things like food and even laundry. As part of that spending, it's going towards rental assistance.
And I want to thank the local leaders for together creating a task force-like response, knowing that we are at our best when we work together and coordinate resources, coordinate our communications to the maximum effect for the community that has been impacted. And the federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met, such as food, baby formula, and the like. And you can apply now for anyone who is watching this who has been affected. There are FEMA personnel who are going door to door to interact personally with folks, especially those who do not have electricity. But also that aid, if you have electricity, can be applied for online. And I encourage people to do that. FEMA will just basically verify your address, and then the process should take hold. FEMA is also providing tens of thousands more dollars for folks to help them be able to deal with home repair, to be able to cover a deductible when and if they have insurance, and also hotel costs. Today I'm also announcing that the President has approved the Governor's request for 100% federal reimbursement of local costs.
Do you support reparations for Black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow for almost a century. We had legalized discrimination, segregation, and now we have segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress. We have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, Black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of Black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects Black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore?
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit black children, black families, black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this. Any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right?
In a nation that prides itself on liberty and justice for all, the persistent reality for African Americans tells a different story. As we navigate the complexities of this society, it becomes painfully clear that the systemic inequities embedded within American institutions often prioritize other groups over our own. This is not merely an observation. It is a lived experience that countless Black individuals endure daily. Historically, African Americans have faced systemic barriers that hinder our progress, while other racial and ethnic groups have frequently been granted advantages. This dynamic is not accidental. It is a reflection of a deeply entrenched system that values whiteness and marginalizes Blackness. From the time of slavery to present-day inequalities, the pattern is undeniable. Our struggle has been met with indifference, our contributions overlooked, and our needs consistently deprioritized. Take, for example, the distribution of resources in education. In many urban areas, schools predominantly attended by Black children are underfunded and lacking essential resources. Meanwhile, schools in predominantly white neighborhoods receive more funding and support. This disparity in educational opportunities not only limits our children's potential, but perpetuates a cycle of poverty and disenfranchisement. While other groups often have access to better facilities and opportunities, we are left to navigate a broken system that fails to invest in our future. Similarly, in the realm of healthcare, African Americans face significant disparities in access and treatment. Studies consistently show that we receive inferior health care compared to our white counterparts. This is not due to a lack of need, but rather a reflection of systemic racism that pervades the medical field. When health policies are crafted, our voices are often sidelined, leading to inadequate care that exacerbates existing health disparities. The COVID-19 pandemic starkly illustrated this, as Black communities were disproportionately affected, revealing the deadly consequences of neglect and inequity. Economic opportunities also highlight this troubling trend. While other groups may receive grants, loans, and resources to start businesses or invest in their communities, African Americans often encounter barriers that stifle our entrepreneurial spirit. Redlining, discriminatory lending practices, and a lack of access to capital have historically marginalized us in the economic landscape. The wealth gap continues to widen, with the average net worth of Black families significantly lower than that of white families. This economic inequality is not merely an oversight. It is a systematic exclusion that keeps us last on the list. The criminal justice system further exemplifies this troubling pattern. African Americans are disproportionately targeted, arrested, and sentenced to longer prison terms compared to other racial groups. The war on drugs, which disproportionately impacted Black communities, has left a legacy of trauma and disenfranchisement. Instead of receiving support for rehabilitation and reintegration, many are met with punishment and further marginalization. This cycle perpetuates a narrative that devalues Black lives while offering more leniency and support to other groups. In the political arena, our representation remains woefully inadequate. Despite the progress made since the Civil Rights Movement, Black voices are often drowned out in policy discussions that directly affect our lives. Legislation that could benefit our communities frequently gets stalled. while policies that prioritize other groups are pushed through with little resistance. The struggle for voting rights continues, with voter suppression tactics targeting African Americans more than any other demographic. It is a constant reminder that our voices, even in a supposed democracy, are often last in line. Yet, amidst this struggle, there is resilience and strength within our communities. We have a rich history of resistance and advocacy that has led to significant social change. The Civil Rights Movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and countless grassroots organizations continue to fight for justice and equality. We must lean into this legacy of activism and solidarity, recognizing that our struggle is interconnected with the broader fight for equity. To address these disparities, we must demand systemic change. This includes advocating for equitable funding in education, equitable healthcare access, economic policies that prioritize our communities, and true representation in politics. It is crucial to hold institutions accountable and challenge the status quo that consistently places us last. As we reflect on our history and the realities we face today, let us remember that our worth is not defined by how society values us. We are deserving of the same opportunities and resources as anyone else. The struggle for equity is ongoing, and we must continue to fight for our place at the table, ensuring that future generations of African Americans do not have to endure the same injustices. In unity, there is strength. We must uplift each other, support our businesses, advocate for our rights, and work together to dismantle the systems that have sought to keep us at the bottom. Our voices are powerful, and it is time we demand to be heard. Together, we can forge a path toward true equity, where African Americans are no longer last on the list, but valued, respected, and uplifted as equal members of society. In the landscape of American politics, there exists a troubling narrative that many African Americans have internalized: the belief that one political party inherently cares more about our community than the other. This mindset often leads to the slogan, "Vote blue no matter who," which reflects an uncritical allegiance to the Democratic Party. While it's essential to participate in the political process, clinging to this mentality can be detrimental, as it obscures the reality that both major parties have historically marginalized our interests. For decades, African Americans have been promised support and advocacy from political leaders, yet the tangible benefits of these promises often fall short. When we examine policies and outcomes, it becomes clear that we remain at the end of the list when it comes to real assistance. Both parties have demonstrated a tendency to prioritize issues that appeal to broader constituencies, often sidelining the specific needs of Black communities. The notion of unwavering support for one party can lead to complacency. When voters believe that their choice is limited to a single party, they may overlook the need to critically assess candidates and their platforms. This can result in a cycle where our community's needs are not addressed, as political leaders feel no pressure to prioritize us, assuming they have our votes locked in. It is crucial for African Americans to recognize that political allegiance should be based on the commitment of candidates to address our issues, not merely on party affiliation. This requires a shift in mindset, one that emphasizes accountability over blind loyalty. By critically evaluating which candidates genuinely advocate for our interests, we can begin to dismantle the status quo that keeps us marginalized. The most foolish thing we can do is to continue believing that one party will automatically serve our best interests while ignoring the need for a more nuanced approach to politics. True progress will come when we demand real change and hold all parties accountable, rather than settling for empty promises. The future of our community depends on our willingness to engage critically with the political landscape and advocate for leaders who truly prioritize our needs.